Oh my goodness, what is happening here? We're checking his heartbeat. I don't believe this.
Here's the story of the angry billionaire nobody could tame, until two twin little black girls did the impossible. Nobody warned you about men like Vincent Hargrove. Nobody could. He wasn't simply difficult. He wasn't merely demanding. Vincent Hargrove was something darker, a 44-year-old property tycoon who moved through life like a Category 5 hurricane, leaving wreckage wherever he touched down. His slate-gray eyes had a particular quality that people remembered long after meeting him. They didn't just look at you, they calculated you, measured your worth in seconds, and almost always found you lacking. His jaw was permanently set like a man who hadn't relaxed in 2 decades because he hadn't. Wealth had not softened Vincent Hargrove. It had sharpened him into something cold and cutting. Before we continue, tell us in the comments what time it is and where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get back to our story. 7 personal physicians in 4 months. That was his record. Not fired for negligence. Not dismissed for malpractice. Fired because they dared to suggest he was human, fallible, mortal, and running out of time. When Dr. Ellison, a quietly brilliant cardiologist, gently recommended he reduce his workload, Vincent swept an entire mahogany side table clear with one arm. An antique lamp worth $14,000 shattered against the wall. Dr. Ellison didn't wait to be dismissed. He simply left and never came back. "I don't employ people to tell me how to live," Vincent had once told his estate manager, Leonard, a loyal but exhausted man who'd somehow survived 3 years in the role. "I employ people to do what I say. Nothing more." Leonard had nodded, as he always did, and said nothing, as he always did. Self-preservation was the only language that made sense in Hargrove House. On a gray Wednesday morning in October, Vincent's rage erupted earlier than usual. His latest physician, Dr. Pamela Reed, had barely finished reviewing his blood work before he cut her off mid-sentence. "Stop." His voice was ice. "I didn't ask for your opinion on my diet. I asked you why my head feels like it's splitting open every morning. So either answer that specific question or pack your bag." Dr. Reed, to her credit, held his gaze for a full 5 seconds. "Mr. Hargrove, these readings strongly suggest." "Get out." She got out. The silence after the door slammed was absolute. 23 staff members scattered across the estate heard it, recognized it, and collectively held their breath. In the East Wing kitchen, 2 small girls kept their eyes down and their hands moving through soapy water. Celeste and Ivy Beaumont were 9 years old. Twins. Identical in almost every way. The same wide brown eyes, the same careful stillness, the same habit of glancing at each other before speaking, as if confirming what the other was thinking. They wore matching dark uniforms with white trim that were slightly too big for their small frames. They worked quietly, efficiently, and invisibly, which was precisely what Vincent Hargrove required. Their mother, Diane, was head housekeeper at Hargrove House, the most trusted member of a staff that rotated constantly. 18 months ago, when a diagnosis of aggressive kidney disease threatened to take her life, she had come to Vincent with shaking hands and desperate eyes. She hadn't asked for money. She'd asked him not to separate her daughters while she fought to live. "Send them to foster care," she begged, "and I may survive the illness, but not the grief." Vincent had agreed. His conditions were precise and unsparing. The girls would work. They would remain unseen. They would cause no disruption. Diane had accepted without hesitation because she had no other choice. What Vincent did not know, what Diane had sworn her daughters never to reveal, was that Celeste and Ivy were not ordinary children. They never had been. Since the age of 5, both girls had possessed something that had no clean name. They could feel sickness in people the way others felt heat radiating from a fire, not metaphorically, but physically, a sensation in their palms and fingertips that told them where something was wrong before any machine could confirm it. When Diane's illness first appeared, the girls had known 2 weeks before her diagnosis. They had held her hands one night while she slept, concentrating with the particular intensity only children can summon when they love someone completely, and by mourning her pain, had eased in a way that baffled her doctor. "You're different," Diane had whispered to them, pulling them close. "And different isn't safe. Not everyone. Promise me you'll stay quiet. Promise me no one finds out." They had promised without hesitation. They kept the promise every day, even as they felt the wrongness building behind Vincent Hargrove's eyes, a deep, dangerous pressure, dark and swelling, like water rising against a cracking dam. It broke on a Thursday afternoon at 3:12 p.m. Leonard found him first. Vincent was face down across his desk, one arm hanging loose, the crystal tumbler he'd been holding shattered on the floor beside him. His breathing was shallow and arrhythmic. His lips had taken on the faint blue tinge of someone whose body is negotiating with death and losing ground fast. "Call an ambulance. Now." Leonard's shout ripped through the estate like a gunshot. Staff flooded the study. Someone screamed. Someone else stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. The estate nurse, Margaret, rushed in and immediately began checking vitals, her expression collapsing into something between professional focus and barely contained panic. "His pulse is critically low," she said. "We need paramedics. Everyone else, back up and give him air." Nobody noticed the two small girls slip through the crowd until they were already at the desk. "Celeste, Ivy." Diane's voice cracked from across the room. "No. Come back here right now." "Mama." Celeste turned and looked at her mother with eyes so steady, so certain, that Diane went silent. It wasn't defiance. It was something older than that. Ivy had already placed one hand flat against Vincent's chest and closed her eyes. The room watched. Nobody moved. Nobody quite understood why. "His heart is barely pushing 40 beats," Ivy said quietly, her small face completely calm. "There's a blockage. Left hemisphere. The blood isn't getting through. It's been building for weeks." She opened her eyes and looked at Margaret. "He has maybe a few minutes." Margaret stared at this 9-year-old child in a maid's uniform and had no words. Celeste positioned herself at Vincent's head, both palms pressed gently against his temples, eyes closed. "She's right," she said. "It's like a wall, a pressure wall. It needs to come down now, or everything behind it goes with it." "What on earth are you?" Leonard started. "Please." Celeste's voice was soft but left no room for argument. "Please be quiet. We need to concentrate." What happened next, 21 staff members would spend years trying to describe, and none of them would ever fully manage it. The twins became still, not the stillness of children who've been told to stop fidgeting, but the deep, rooted stillness of something ancient and purposeful. Warmth radiated from their hands. Not imagined warmth. Real heat, perceptible to the people standing closest. Margaret later told investigators that she'd felt it on her own skin from 4 feet away. One of the kitchen staff claimed she saw something luminous around the girl's fingers, not bright, not dramatic, just a quiet golden shimmer, there and then gone, like sunlight catching water. 1 minute passed, then another. Then Vincent Hargrove gasped. It was an enormous, wrenching breath, the sound of a man hauled back from somewhere very far away. His eyes flew open. For a moment, he looked at the ceiling with the pure bewilderment of someone who doesn't know which world he's woken into. Then color surged back into his face. His breathing steadied. His hand, the one that had been hanging limp, curled slowly into a fist and then relaxed. The room erupted. People stumbled backward. Margaret grabbed her stethoscope with trembling hands. Diane had one fist pressed to her mouth, tears streaming silently. Vincent turned his head slowly. His gaze found the 2 girls kneeling beside him, their small hands withdrawing gently, their faces peaceful and exhausted. "Who?" His voice came out as a rasp. He swallowed. "Who are you?" Celeste looked at him with clear, untroubled eyes. "You were dying, Mr. Hargrove. Something was blocking the blood to your brain. We helped open it back up." "That's not," he stopped. His hand moved to his own temple. The pressure, the grinding, months-long pressure that he'd been hiding and refusing to name, was simply gone. "That's not possible." "No," Ivy agreed almost gently. "It probably isn't." The paramedics arrived 9 minutes later and found Vincent Hargrove sitting upright, oriented, his vitals unremarkable. Lead responder James Okafor stood over him with an expression caught between professional confusion and personal disbelief. "Sir, we received a critical collapse call. Your blood pressure is normal. Your pulse is strong. What happened here?" Nobody in the room gave a clean answer, because there wasn't one. At the hospital, the tests began in earnest. MRI, CT angiography, neurological assessment, full blood panel. The team assigned to Vincent Hargrove was thorough, experienced, and increasingly baffled. The scans told a story that didn't track with any accepted timeline. There was evidence, clear, undeniable imaging evidence of a cerebrovascular event serious enough to have caused catastrophic, permanent damage. There was also evidence that new collateral blood pathways had formed in the affected region with a speed that contradicted every clinical model available. This kind of neural rerouting, Dr. Anita Vasquez told him on day 3, setting down his file with the careful movements of someone choosing her words, typically develops over a period of weeks, sometimes months. Your scans show it happened in minutes, possibly less. She paused. Whatever occurred before the paramedics arrived didn't just save your life. It changed the architecture of your brain. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "2 little girls," he finally said. "Twin sisters. They put their hands on me." Dr. Vasquez said nothing. 21 people watched it happen, he said. "I'm not confused. I'm not misremembering. Those children did something that neither of us has a framework for, and it worked." He came home on a Sunday evening, moving through his own house like a stranger in it, seeing things he'd stopped seeing long ago. The tension in Leonard's shoulders, the way the kitchen staff spoke in careful, reduced voices, the faint wariness on every face that turned toward him. He had built this. He had cultivated this fear the way other men cultivated loyalty, not understanding until now that he had grown something poisonous. He asked to see Diane and her daughters in his study. They entered as people enter the rooms of those who have power over them, quietly, braced, making themselves small. The girls sat in chairs that were too large for them, feet dangling above the floor. Diane stood behind them with the contained dignity of a woman who has learned to endure. Vincent looked at them for a long time before he spoke. "I need you to tell me everything," he said. His voice was different. Even he could hear it. Something had gone out of it. Something that had been there so long he hadn't known it was there until it was missing. "Not what you think I want to hear. Everything." Diane told him. From the beginning. The girl's gift, its first appearance, its quiet development, its limits. The way it had slowed her illness, buying her months she hadn't been promised. The fear that had kept them silent in this house. The promise she had extracted from her daughters before they ever crossed his threshold. "We thought you'd call us liars," Celeste said. Her voice was small, but she met his eyes. Or something worse. The shame that moved through Vincent Hargrove in that moment was unlike anything money or power had ever made him feel. It was thorough. It left nowhere to hide. "You were right," he said. His throat was tight. "A week ago, you would have been completely right." He looked at the 2 girls who had saved a man who had never given them a single reason to. "But you did it anyway. Why?" Ivy looked at him with the simple directness that children sometimes have before the world teaches them to be strategic. "Because you were hurting," she said. "And we could help. That's all." Vincent Hargrove, who had not cried in 11 years, pressed his hand over his eyes and wept. The staff meeting the next morning was brief, and by every account afterward, unlike anything those assembled had ever witnessed. Vincent stood at the head of the room and did not perform remorse. He stated facts. He had been cruel. He had treated human beings as instruments. 2 children, 9 years old, in uniforms too big for them, had shown him more genuine humanity than he had managed in 44 years of living. What followed was concrete and immediate. Celeste and Ivy would no longer work in the house. They would be enrolled in Callaway Academy, tuition fully covered, with every resource available to them. Diane's salary was restructured with a raise full medical coverage, and a formal guarantee of employment that could not be revoked at his mood. Every member of staff received a 40% pay increase, a benefits package, and a written commitment that their working hours would be humane. "I was a monster," Vincent said to the room. "That ends today. Not because I'm trying to rewrite what happened, because those girls reminded me that being better is a choice, and I've been refusing to make it for a very long time." In the months that followed, Vincent Hargrove made good on every word. He funded independent research into the twins' abilities, rigorous, ethical, child-centered research that put their well-being before every other consideration. What scientists documented was remarkable, a diagnostic accuracy that exceeded 96% across dozens of blind studies and isolated cases of accelerated tissue healing that had no satisfying clinical explanation. But what Vincent protected most fiercely was simpler than any data. He protected their childhood. School came first. Friends came first. Play came first. The gift was not a job. It was not a performance. It was part of who they were, and it would be treated with the same care he should have been showing them from the beginning. 9 months after Vincent Hargrove nearly died at his own desk, the Beaumont Community Medical Center opened its doors. State-of-the-art, fully staffed, accessible to patients regardless of income. Twice a week after school, Celeste and Ivy would walk its corridors with their mother, not as workers, not as anomalies, but as children who had chosen to share what they had. They held hands with patients. They whispered to doctors. They found what machines sometimes missed and sent frightened people home with answers. People called them the Miracle Twins. The name followed them everywhere, warm and reverent. But if you asked either girl what she thought about that, she would simply shrug and say the same thing she'd said to a dying billionaire on a Thursday afternoon in October. "You were hurting. We could help. That's all." If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories about the courage hiding in the smallest places, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Thank you for watching. Remember, sometimes it takes the gentlest hands to break the hardest walls.